Clara stood in her quiet kitchen, the afternoon sun casting soft golden light across the counter, and felt a small but persistent drip from the sink echoing in the otherwise still house, a reminder of the small problem she had been putting off. She had tried to ignore it for days, hoping it would somehow stop on its own, but the stubborn leak grew louder, like a heartbeat she couldn't escape, and finally she picked up her phone to call Daniel, her husband's friend, someone who had always been dependable, someone whose presence felt comforting even if she didn't see him often. When Daniel arrived, he brought with him a toolbox, a reassuring smile, and an easy confidence that made the kitchen feel instantly warmer, the ordinary space suddenly charged with subtle energy she hadn't expected, and Clara found herself noting the way he moved around naturally, how he knelt by the sink with careful attention to the pipes, how his hands worked deftly, and how even small gestures, like handing her the wrench or adjusting the faucet, seemed to linger in her memory, making her pulse quicken in ways that were both alarming and thrilling. Conversation flowed effortlessly between them, light at first, touching on mundane topics like the weather and home maintenance, yet layered with an unspoken tension, a subtle awareness of each other that neither could fully acknowledge, and Clara noticed the little details, the way he glanced at her with curiosity, the warmth in his voice when he explained a repair, the easy laugh that seemed to fill the room and make her smile without thinking. As Daniel examined the pipes checking for leaks, he paused, looked up, and their eyes met in a moment that lasted just a fraction too long, and Clara felt her chest tighten, a mixture of surprise, fascination, and something unfamiliar that made her heart race. A quiet pull that she couldn't name but that demanded her attention, a feeling that made the mundane act of fixing a pipe feel suddenly intimate and charged with possibility. She tried to focus on the dripping water, on the small adjustments he made to the plumbing, on the way he described the simple steps he would take to repair it, but her thoughts kept drifting to him, to the sound of his voice, to the way he moved, to the warmth radiating from him in the small sunlit kitchen, and she felt a strange combination of nervousness and anticipation, a sense that this ordinary moment might hold something extraordinary if she allowed herself to feel it. As they continued working, the conversation deepened subtly, moving from small talk to personal reflections, and Daniel shared stories from his life, his struggles, the small victories and the quiet disappointments, and Clara listened intently, feeling a sense of connection that went beyond friendship, a warmth that stirred emotions she had not anticipated, a sense of understanding and empathy that made her feel seen and appreciated in ways that were rare and precious. Their laughter blended with the sound of dripping water, their movements occasionally brushing against each other as they handed tools or adjusted the pipes, and each contact, each shared glance, sent tiny shocks through her awareness, a mix of surprise, delight, and longing that made her heart flutter even as she tried to stay composed, reminding herself that he was her husband's friend, someone familiar but also someone whose presence now seemed unexpectedly magnetic. As Daniel finished adjusting the final fittings, he wiped his hands on a rag and for a moment, the room fell into a quiet stillness, the only sound the soft tick of water settling into the repaired pipe, and Clara felt an inexplicable pull, a sensation that this visit was no longer about plumbing but about the fragile, thrilling tension that had grown between them, subtle and unspoken, and she wondered if he too had noticed it, if the lingering glances, the gentle smiles and the small, shared laughter had awakened something in him as it had in her, a quiet, simmering awareness of feelings they were not ready to name but could not ignore. And as she watched him gather his tools to leave, she felt a strange mixture of anticipation and anxiety, the sense that ordinary moments could suddenly hold extraordinary potential, that this simple visit to fix a leaking pipe might mark the beginning of something unforgettable, and even as Daniel stepped toward the door, giving her one last look, the sunlight catching his hair and his eyes sparkling with friendly warmth, Clara knew that the memory of this afternoon, the sensation of closeness, the electric brush of hands, the subtle dance of conversation and glances, would linger in her heart long after he left, a quiet reminder that life often surprises in the smallest ways, that the most ordinary days can hold moments of unexpected emotion, and that sometimes the simplest disruption, like a leaking pipe, can open a door to feelings she had not anticipated but would never forget. The burst of water from the sink was sudden and shocking, splashing across the tiles and startling both Clara and Daniel, but it broke the tension in a strange, exhilarating way, forcing them to act together, hands occasionally brushing, laughter spilling uncontrollably, and in that chaos, something unspoken passed between them, a spark neither wanted to name but both felt, as they bent over the wet floor, grabbing towels, mopping up and slipping slightly, which only drew them closer in instinctive reflex, their eyes meeting in brief, electric moments that made Clara's heart thump with a mixture of fear, amusement and something deeper she had not expected. And as Daniel stood upright, dripping wet but smiling, handing her a towel with a teasing glint in his eyes, Clara noticed the subtle change in him, the gentleness in his expression, the warmth of his presence, the way he seemed more attentive, more aware of her than ever before. And as they worked to dry the kitchen and assess the damage, they found themselves talking differently, their voices softer, more intimate, sharing thoughts and feelings that had been tucked away, Daniel speaking about quiet moments of loneliness, about hopes and fears, and Clara responding with her own confessions, not fully aware why she was opening her heart to him in this way, yet feeling a profound connection, a sense of trust and understanding that went beyond casual friendship, that made the ordinary act of cleaning up a spill feel like a shared secret, a small, private world where only the two of them existed for a brief, suspended moment. And as they laughed at the absurdity of the situation, Clara felt herself drawn in by his calm confidence, the way he moved with purpose yet never seemed hurried, the subtle gestures that hinted at his kindness and attentiveness, and she realized that this was more than simple attraction, it was recognition, a feeling that she mattered to him in a way that made her feel seen and cherished, a sensation that left her heart aching with longing even as she tried to push it aside, reminding herself of the boundaries that existed, the fact that Daniel was her husband's friend, yet unable to ignore the magnetic pull between them, the warmth in his eyes when he glanced at her, the way his smile lingered just a moment too long, and as they finished the cleanup, the room smelling faintly of wet towels and the soft sunlight streaming through the windows, they stood for a moment in silence, catching their breath, realizing the intensity of what had passed between them, and Clara felt a shiver of awareness that this encounter, so brief, so accidental, had shifted something inside her, had awakened feelings she hadn't anticipated, a longing for connection, for understanding, for the quiet thrill of being seen by someone who understood her without judgment. And Daniel, too, seemed caught in the same current, his eyes holding a depth of emotion that spoke louder than any words, a mixture of regret, admiration, and something tender that made Clara's heart skip. And as he adjusted his shirt, wiping stray water droplets from his face, she noticed the gentle curve of his lips, the slight furrow of his brow in concentration, and she realized that every small detail about him, every movement, every glance, was imprinting itself on her memory, leaving a lingering impression that she knew she would carry long after he left. And yet, there was no rush, no overt declaration, just the quiet, shared acknowledgement that something profound had occurred, something that neither dared name aloud but both felt deeply. And as they finally finished repairing the sink, tightening the last fittings, Daniel straightened and gave her a soft, almost shy smile, handing her the final tool and meeting her gaze in a long, steady look that made her chest tighten with longing and curiosity. And in that suspended moment, Clara felt a wave of emotion, anticipation, uncertainty, and a yearning she couldn't quite define, because for the first time, the familiar had become charged with possibility, the ordinary had transformed into something extraordinary, and she knew that when Daniel finally left, the memory of this chaotic, intimate, unexpected afternoon would stay with her, echoing in quiet moments, a secret tension and a tender excitement that neither could ignore, leaving her heart full, her mind restless, and her soul subtly awakened to emotions that were tender, complicated, and utterly unforgettable. After the chaos of the burst pipe, the kitchen had settled into an almost surreal quiet, the only sounds being the soft drip of water from the repaired sink and the faint rustle of damp towels that Clara and Daniel had laid out to dry. Yet the air between them remained charged, heavy with unspoken words and lingering glances, as they stood in the warm afternoon light, both slightly wet, both aware of how close they had been, how much electricity had passed in every brush of their hands, every shared look, and Clara felt a rush of emotion she could neither name nor control, a mixture of admiration, longing, and confusion that made her chest tighten, yet somehow felt thrilling rather than frightening. And Daniel, noticing the shift, hesitated, his eyes searching hers, soft but intense, as though he too understood the unspoken connection that had woven itself through their shared ordeal. And as he offered her the last towel with a gentle smile, their fingers brushed again, lingering just long enough to send a shiver down Clara's spine, the simple act of contact loaded with all the emotions they dared not speak. And as she dried her hands, she found herself stealing glances at him, noticing details she hadn't before. The way his hair stuck slightly to his forehead from the water, the faint glint of sunlight in his eyes, the warmth in his voice even when he spoke about something mundane, the subtle confidence in his movements that made him seem effortlessly reassuring and appealing, and she realized that the day had shifted from ordinary to something unforgettable, a moment suspended between normal life and the thrilling possibility of what might have been. And Daniel, too, seemed affected, pausing as if caught between the comfort of friendship and the pull of something more, a flicker of vulnerability in his gaze that mirrored her own, a sense that they were both aware of feelings that could not be voiced, yet were impossible to ignore, and as they worked together to gather the remaining tools, wipe up stray puddles, and restore order to the kitchen, the rhythm of their movements became almost intimate, a dance of cooperation and silent acknowledgement, and Clara felt her pulse quicken each time their hands met accidentally while reaching for a tool, each accidental touch sending a ripple of awareness through her body, leaving her both exhilarated and contemplative, aware that something significant had passed between them, a subtle awakening that left her heart fluttering, her thoughts tangled with curiosity and desire, a feeling that was tender, restrained, yet profoundly affecting. And as Daniel finally packed up his toolbox, he paused at the doorway, giving her one last lingering look, soft, reflective, almost hesitant, and Clara found herself rooted to the spot, caught between the desire to speak and the understanding that some things were better left unspoken, the quiet tension between them hanging in the air like a delicate thread, fragile yet potent. And when he finally stepped out into the sunlight, closing the door softly behind him, Clara leaned against it, her mind racing, her heart still pounding, and she felt an ache that was both sweet and painful, the kind of ache that comes from realizing that life had briefly shifted, revealing a hidden layer of emotion, a glimpse of intimacy and connection that was fleeting yet unforgettable. And in the following moments, as she moved through her now quiet, orderly kitchen, Clara found herself replaying every detail, the laughter, the touches, the small smiles, the shared chaos, the way Daniel had looked at her, the warmth in his presence, the quiet understanding they had shared. And she understood that this encounter, born from something as mundane as a leaking pipe, had left a lasting imprint on her heart, a memory that would linger in quiet moments, that would surface unexpectedly in her thoughts, a reminder that ordinary life could suddenly carry extraordinary emotions, subtle, tender, yet profoundly moving, and that sometimes the simplest disruptions, an accident, a shared laugh, a touch, could awaken feelings long dormant, creating a moment of emotional resonance that was both thrilling and bittersweet, a reminder of the complexity of human connection, the unexpected depth of attraction, and the quiet power of intimacy without words. And as the sun dipped lower outside, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, Clara knew that the memory of this afternoon would remain with her, a soft, persistent echo of longing, warmth, and a tender, unspoken bond that she would carry quietly in her heart, feeling the gentle tension, the fleeting thrill, and the beautiful ache of a connection that had touched her soul in a way that was subtle, emotional, romantic, and unforgettable.